I need to warn you, what you're about to watch is extremely disturbing and may trigger emotional responses. This video is not suitable for minors or for those who prefer to avoid very intense themes. This biblical story reveals the darkest side of humanity, exposing the deep evil that can exist within each of us. What we are about to explore is so impactful that it might leave you reflecting on it for a long time. If you choose to continue, be prepared. This story challenges our perception of morality and shows just how far humanity can fall when ethical principles are abandoned. What follows is not easy to digest, but it is a crucial part of the biblical narrative. Imagine a story so shocking, so deeply unsettling, that it has remained one of the most disturbing accounts in the Bible for centuries. We're talking about the events detailed in Judges chapters 19 to 21, a story that many choose to overlook because of its sheer horror. This is not just a tale of old. It's a raw, brutal reminder of the darkest capabilities of humanity. In these chapters, we encounter a narrative that feels almost too terrible to be true. The story begins with a Levite and his concubine, but what unfolds is a nightmarish sequence of events that culminates in unimaginable tragedy. This isn't the kind of story you expect to find in a holy text, but it serves as a stark illustration of the chaos that can ensue when morality is abandoned. This isn't just ancient history. It's a powerful testament to the consequences of unchecked evil. Imagine the shock of the people who first heard this story, passed down through generations, each retelling adding layers of horror. Even today, it's hard to fathom the depth of violence and depravity that this account reveals. It's a story that lingers in the mind, long after the details have been heard. And yet, despite its horror, this story is part of the Bible's rich tapestry, serving as a profound lesson for all who read it. It's a narrative that doesn't just sit quietly in the pages. It leaps out, demanding your attention, forcing you to confront the uncomfortable truth that sometimes the worst monsters are not the ones in our nightmares, but the ones within us. As we delve deeper into this shocking story, remember that this is only the beginning. The events that follow will challenge your understanding of justice, morality, and the very fabric of human society. Prepare yourself, because the tale is about to take an even darker turn. In the heart of ancient Israel, a Levite, a man dedicated to religious duties, takes a concubine from Bethlehem. This might seem like the start of a typical story, but the events that follow are anything but ordinary. The concubine betrays him, leaving him and returning to her father's house. This act of infidelity sets the stage for a journey that spirals into tragedy. The Levite, determined to retrieve his concubine, travels to Bethlehem. This decision, seemingly driven by a desire for reconciliation, turns out to be the beginning of a journey marked by misfortune. As they travel back together, what starts as an attempt to restore what was lost becomes a descent into a series of catastrophic events that no one could have foreseen. In this story, we see a reflection of how quickly life can take a turn for the worse. What begins as an effort to mend a broken relationship soon unravels into a nightmare. The journey they undertake is fraught with danger, and as they traverse the ancient roads, the shadows of fate begin to loom over them, ready to unleash a storm of calamity. It's a stark reminder that sometimes, despite our best intentions, the path we choose can lead to unforeseen consequences. The Levite's journey with his concubine becomes a cautionary tale, one that shows how quickly the quest for resolution can spiral into disaster. When we least expect it, we move further into this harrowing tale. The gravity of their situation becomes increasingly apparent. The story is about to take a turn that will plunge them, and those they encounter, into the depths of despair. Brace yourself as we explore the terrifying events that follow their fateful journey. As the Levite, his concubine, and his servant journey through the land, they arrive in Gibeah, a town within the tribe of Benjamin. But instead of receiving the hospitality that was customary in those times, they are met with indifference and neglect. No one offers them a place to stay for the night, a glaring breach of the cultural norms that valued the care of travelers. It's hard to imagine the unease that must have settled over them as the night began to fall, with no shelter in sight. In those days, offering hospitality wasn't just a nicety. It was a moral obligation, a reflection of one's character. Yet, here in Gibeah, The townspeople turned a blind eye to their needs, leaving them vulnerable and exposed. Finally, an old man, returning from his work in the fields, notices them and offers them shelter. It's a small glimmer of kindness in a town that had shown none. But this act, though seemingly noble, would soon be overshadowed by the horrors that awaited them. The old man's hospitality, while well-intentioned, was not enough to shield them from the evil that lurked within the town. This part of the story serves as a powerful reminder of the consequences that can arise when basic human decency is abandoned. The lack of hospitality in Gibeah set the stage for the unspeakable tragedy that would soon unfold. It's a chilling example of how neglect and indifference can open the door to far greater evils. As we continue to follow the Levites' story, the darkness of the situation becomes more suffocating. The night in Gibeah is about to descend into chaos, as the safety they sought in that town turns into a nightmare beyond imagination. As night fell in Gibeah, the situation took a horrifying turn. A group of wicked men surrounded the old man's house, demanding that the Levite be handed over to them so they could abuse him. The terror of that moment is almost unimaginable, as the Levite and those with him faced the darkest side of human nature, where cruelty and violence had no bounds. In an attempt to protect the Levite, the old man offered something unthinkable: his own daughter, a virgin, and the Levite's concubine, to satisfy the mob's depraved desires. It's a decision that reflects the desperation of the situation, but also the horrifying moral decay that allowed such a suggestion to even be considered. It's a moment that shocks us to the core, revealing just how twisted humanity can become when fear and evil take hold. What followed was an act of brutality so severe that it defies comprehension. The concubine was thrown to the mob, where she was abused throughout the night. The cruelty inflicted upon her was not just physical, but also a brutal violation of her dignity and humanity. By morning, she was left for dead, her body a silent testament to the unimaginable violence she had endured. The horror of that night is one of the most disturbing moments in the Bible, showing us the depths to which people can sink when they abandon all sense of morality and compassion. The tragedy of the concubine's fate is a stark reminder of the consequences of allowing evil to go unchecked. It's a story that forces us to confront the harsh reality of what can happen when society turns a blind eye to the suffering of others. As dawn broke, and the Levite found his concubine lying lifeless at the door, the full weight of the tragedy became clear. But this was just the beginning of the devastation that would follow. The events of that night would set off a chain reaction of violence and destruction that would change the course of an entire nation. The morning after the brutal assault, the Levite made a decision that would reverberate throughout all of Israel. In a state of grief and outrage, he took the body of his concubine and did something that defies all reason. He cut her into 12 pieces. Each piece was sent to one of the 12 tribes of Israel, a macabre message meant to shock the nation into action. It was a horrific act, both in its execution and in what it symbolized: the utter breakdown of justice and morality. This gruesome act was not just a call for attention. It was a desperate plea for justice in a world where it seemed all had been lost. Imagine receiving such a ghastly parcel, the shock and horror it would evoke. The Levites' actions were extreme, but they succeeded in their intent: to rally the tribes of Israel and force them to confront the evil that had been allowed to fester in their midst. What the Levite did was more than just a cry for help. It was a declaration of war against the corruption that had taken root in the land. By dismembering the body of his concubine, he was forcing the people of Israel to see, in the most graphic way possible, the consequences of their collective moral decay. It was a wake-up call, a demand for the nation to take responsibility for the evil that had been allowed to thrive. This act serves as a chilling reminder of how far things can go when justice is not upheld. The Levite's actions were born out of a sense of helplessness and rage, a reaction to the unimaginable suffering that had been inflicted upon his concubine. It's a stark illustration of the lengths to which people will go when they feel that there is no other way to make their voices heard. As the tribes of Israel received the dismembered body parts, they were left with no choice but to respond. What followed was a chain of events that would lead to one of the most devastating conflicts in Israel's history. The Levites' gruesome message had succeeded in mobilizing the nation, but it also unleashed a wave of violence that would nearly destroy one of their own tribes. The Levites' gruesome message ignited a fury across Israel that could not be contained. The tribes, horrified and enraged by what had happened in Gibeah, gathered as one to demand justice. What began as a call for retribution quickly spiraled into a full-blown civil war, with the tribe of Benjamin standing alone against the rest of Israel. The conflict that ensued was brutal, pitting brother against brother, and the cost in human lives was staggering. Imagine the scene as thousands of men from all over Israel converged, united by their anger and a shared sense of duty to purge the evil from their land. The battles that followed were fierce and relentless, with no mercy given. The tribe of Benjamin, small in number but fierce in defense, fought with everything they had, but they were no match for the overwhelming forces arrayed against them. The bloodshed was unimaginable, and the land was soaked with the lifeblood of Israel's sons. The cost of this war was devastating. Entire towns were wiped out, and the tribe of Benjamin was nearly annihilated. Only a few hundred men survived the onslaught, and Israel was left to grapple with the guilt and sorrow of having brought one of their own to the brink of extinction. What had started as a quest for justice had turned into a tragedy of epic proportions, leaving the nation shattered and grieving. This civil war wasn't just a battle over justice. It was a battle for the very soul of Israel. The violence and destruction wrought by the conflict revealed the deep divisions and moral decay that had taken root within the nation. It was a harsh lesson in the consequences of allowing evil to flourish unchecked, and the toll it took on the people of Israel was immeasurable. As the dust settled and the survivors of Benjamin emerged from the carnage, Israel was left with a profound sense of loss and regret. The war had ended, but the wounds it left would take generations to heal, and as they began to pick up the pieces, the people of Israel were forced to confront the grim reality of what they had done and the high price they had paid for their vengeance. As the dust of the civil war settled, Israel was left to ponder the lessons of the bloodshed. The events that unfolded were a harsh reminder of the consequences of abandoning responsibility and allowing moral decay to seep into the fabric of society. The tragic tale of the Levite and his concubine serves as a powerful lesson about the importance of upholding justice and treating every individual as a bearer of God's image, deserving of dignity and respect. One of the most striking lessons from this story is the danger of turning a blind eye to evil. The people of Israel had allowed the wickedness in Gibeah to fester, and by the time they acted, the situation had spiraled out of control. This narrative forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that ignoring injustice only allows it to grow stronger, eventually leading to consequences that are far more devastating than we could have imagined. The story also highlights the importance of unity in the face of corruption. When the tribes of Israel finally came together to demand justice, they were able to address the evil that had taken root. However, their delayed action also showed the risks of waiting too long to come together. It's a lesson that resonates even today. When we see wrongdoing, it's imperative that we stand united in addressing it before it's too late. Another profound takeaway from this story is the devastating impact of revenge. While the initial desire for justice was justified, the path it took led to widespread destruction and sorrow. The near extinction of the tribe of Benjamin serves as a warning against allowing the quest for retribution to overshadow the need for mercy and reconciliation. It reminds us that true justice must be tempered with compassion, or it risks becoming another form of injustice. Finally, this story serves as a sobering reminder of the importance of staying close to God. The moral decay that led to the events in Judges 19-21 was a result of Israel's gradual departure from their faith and their failure to follow God's laws. The consequences were dire, and the pain and suffering that followed serve as a powerful call to return to a life of faithfulness and righteousness. As we come to the end of this intense journey, the lessons from Judges 19 are clear and powerful. This story challenges us to reflect on the importance of justice and responsibility. It's a reminder that we must stand against evil and uphold what is right, even in the darkest times. So, what will you do with this message? Let it inspire you to live with integrity and purpose, to be a force for good in the world. If this story has touched your heart, perhaps it's time to make a change. Consider embracing Jesus and the hope and love he offers. He has a purpose for your life, and it's never too late to accept it. Before you go, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay connected. If you want to dive deeper into the mysteries of the Bible, click on the card on your screen now to watch. Why Jesus had to meet Moses and Elijah at the Mount of Transfiguration. Bible Mysteries Explained. May God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.